welcome to the Corner Office. I'm Chris Marchetti, as some of you may know. Today we have a special guest. I'll introduce him and he can talk about himself a little bit. So sitting to my right, I guess that's potentially your left, is Richard. He's been in the courier business as long as we have. And so I will let Richard introduce himself to you and we'll kind of have a good conversation about some stuff. So, Richard?
I'm Richard Zimba from Open Road Courier in Denver, but over the years I've been involved in a good number of courier operations of various sizes and doing various kinds of work, and I started in the industry in '78.
Wow. I was still in high school.
I was just out of high school. I literally started taxi driving the week I turned 18 and started going to college, and the taxi company did the air courier work. It was in Columbia, South Carolina. So the yellow cab company, I started delivering people, and within a few days they were go pick up this package at the phone company and take it out of the airport to Delta and write this thing called a Delta Dash bill. So that's how I originally got in the courier business.
Was that for Sky Courier or who was that?
We actually handled a lot of the names from '78 are still. A lot of the names are still there today. Names like, Sky Courier isn't there today, but we were handling Sky Courier, Air Courier. Back then it was Choice Air Courier.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Did stuff like that, and just numerous little companies. Sonic was a little company back then, but a lot of companies, especially out of New York, LA, kind of stuff.
Yep.
But this was Columbia, South Carolina. So back then, there wasn't that many specialized people, delivery companies in mid-size or smaller size towns that understood courier work. So the larger air courier companies were forced to use cab companies. But then they also learned the work and handled it quite well.
Right. Well, as you may or may not remember, I originally started with Sky Courier as a dispatcher, and in a lot of little cities they did use the cab companies. I remember there was one called like Mabel's Cab Company in Birmingham or something like that. You had these kind of things, and the cab companies, they used their own independent contractor drivers where they could support them. But then in a lot of small cities they use stuff like that. So.
I think to this day there's still people using cab companies in Billings, Montana, and some small markets like that, because again, there's not enough air courier work to support a specialized courier company.
Right.
And it's getting hard for them because of all the TSA.
Oh yes. Especially after 9/11.
Yeah, imagine having to have a cab driver that's TSA certified.
Oh boy.
That gets tough.
Cab drivers are kind of shaky. Oh, never mind. You were a cab driver.
Yeah, exactly.
So
they can be.
They can be, but a lot of them are fine, upstanding citizens like you.
Exactly. That's what it was.
Right, exactly. And we were talking about this earlier. We were trying to remember where we met. It was maybe by a poll. We're probably like in the courier, like there's the CLDA, which was originally the MCAA, and then there's the ECA, which are two of the main associations we both participate
Probably met at
with.
one of those, or a courier weekend.
Right, so we...
It's in the 90s.
Yeah, it's been a long time, so we're getting older, and so the exact details elude us.
Exactly. I mean, I've been racking my brains because I usually remember this stuff, but I can't remember when we met. I just know it's probably mid-90s.
Yeah. So we met at these. Would go to these different courier things. That sometimes they seem kind of boondoggly, and other times, like the ECA, seems to be a little bit more focused on trying to help people find business. But we kind of, I don't know how we struck up a friendship, and it's been going now strong for a long time.
Right.
Been out to see Richard Marianne's place in Denver a number of years back. We kind of did some stuff, and so they were in town this weekend. We brought them, said, hey, you need to experience Washington in the summer. So we did a little sightseeing on Saturday, had some fun in that. So how do you think the industry has kind of changed over time? Because it certainly has. Back from the days of moving lots of paper and stuff.
Right.
What are you all seeing out there?
It was interesting in the 90s when emailing got big, and not too long after, people were attaching files, and then they were attaching blueprints, right? And then things like it came along where you could buy a house over a fax machine or email attachments, and then not too long later it was Check 21.
Right. Right.
that allowed all more digital signatures for like the whole banking courier industry just disappeared almost overnight, a large portion of it. And I remember in the 90s, we were worried about what was going to be left to deliver,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Sure. Yeah.
Because half of it was probably paper, half of it was probably, say, mechanical parts that we knew would continue to exist. You couldn't stuff a circuit board into a fax machine. I'm sure someone probably tried.
I'm sure. Yeah.
But both us and you got big into critical parts.
Yep.
So that was a whole new ballooning industry starting in the very late 80s and really booming in the 90s. And a lot of us got into distribution in the late 90s. There was the monster UPS strike in 97
Mm.
that ticked off an awful lot of people that literally could not ship product. I think it was for 17 or 19 days. And they started looking for alternatives. And we were lucky because I remember the technology was coming down to our level about that time where we could get sophisticated software and our drivers could do scanning and we could do EDI files of data,
Right.
right? So we could compete with a UPS. And I remember we had some friends in the Southeast that said, "Oh, we've gotten big into distribution and we're making a bunch of money delivering $2.30 boxes." And I was just sort of scratching my head going, "How the heck can you do that? They're $2.30." It's like, well, we do 6,000 a night of them.
Mm.
So that changed the equation, and based on our friends' advice and the folks like you that we network with, we were able to basically pick up an education, and we got quite big into distribution, and we got to a point where we were covering, I think, at one of the companies, we were 96% of the population of Colorado, which
Wow.
can be quite rural, and we were doing, I think, about 10,000 parcels a night.
Man, it's a lot.
That's
a lot.
that
Totally,
kind of
that's a
stuff
lot.
with 5 offices and sort facilities and that type stuff. So we were literally competing with UPS on a regional basis. So as certain kinds of work have dried up, other kind of work has appeared and saved us.
Yep.
And what's really become big in the last, I'd say, 5, 8, 10 years has been the medical air shipments.
Yes.
And I think a lot of that had to do with the packaging that's been created
Mm.
has
Right.
allowed things to stay cold for enough days to get it from Denver to Sweden,
Right.
right? Or Singapore to Iowa,
Right.
And so it's allowed all the both the healthcare, but say the research and development side of healthcare, it's allowed all of that to go global.
Right. Right.
It's amazing. We'll pick up a little vial of blood in Denver and send it to Italy because there's one lab in the world in Italy that tests for a certain
Right. Right.
thing, and it's
Yes.
in Italy. So that blood gets drawn from a patient in Colorado and goes on a plane, and 2 days later it's in Italy.
Right.
And it's just amazing how this whole industry, the whole medical industry, has just ballooned.
Absolutely. Well, I think a couple things you made me think about is one is the two associations. There's not really a courier school. I mean, people go to school for logistics, but what we do, the benefit of those organizations really is like friendships like ours and the people that we met along the way that told us, hey, what, I'm doing this or I'm doing that.
Right.
So, I mean, I think those organizations serve a purpose that's valuable. I mean, sometimes I can't get to the conference or that, but I have friends that I've known from those associations for my career.
Right.
And the other thing you made me think about was like technology. Like I remember when UPS came out and they could do signature capture, and that seemed like so amazing. But it was so expensive. That technology was too expensive for companies like ours.
Right.
But over time, as the technology advanced and became more affordable, then there are things like that. So it allowed us to compete and offer more to the customers,
Right.
and make them feel like they were actually getting. So I mean, getting that kind of service that the
Right.
big guys can just pound into their head through marketing and that. So technology's kind of come a long way. I remember I carry a pen with me all the time. It's a habit I can't break.
Right.
I was trained at Sky Courier that don't ever come to the phone without a pen and a piece of paper.
Right.
Because back then, all you had was a pager.
Someone's
So-
going to say something, yeah.
So your pager would go off, and you'd find a pay phone, which
Right.
don't exist anymore. You'd have to find, you knew where all the pay phones
You were always in the
were.
worst neighborhood when you got paged.
Yeah, you
too.
knew where the payphones were. You pulled over, and you'd be there with your pen and paper, writing down a job order, and going running off and doing what you had to do. And then when beepers came along, and then when beepers were digital, that you get a phone number on it, you're like, "Whoa,
That
this
was
is
cool,
so cool! I know who's calling me now." But it's come so far in technology. In fact, you worked for a technology company for a little while, didn't you?
Correct.
And what was that?
That was Key Software out of New Jersey that does Accelerator.
Mm-hmm.
I was in a situation in Denver where I'd left one company, but I had a no-compete for about a year.
Mm-hmm.
And so I couldn't be in the courier business in Colorado within 150 miles of my home.
Wow.
So I went to work for the software company. That was actually the software that we ran for 15 years.
Right.
So I knew all the folks, and I loved the software and that kind of stuff, and it was a real easy transition
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. But, back to like phones and signature and all that kind of stuff, we were watching this early on. I remember going to a seminar or a convention involving data devices in the late 80s in Atlanta.
Wow.
And it was way over my head. It was more like technology people.
Right.
So they were speaking the language that just left you in the dust kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But back then, it was all, there was no such thing as cell phones or definitely apps. It was like 88, 89. So, we had people talking to us that said, we can write you programs to send all your data to your drivers. They're on these $5,000 things we call bricks.
Right.
And they were literally like a brick and weighed like 4 pounds. And, and the cost was just ungodly.
Right.
It was just out the roof for a little bit of data, because there was a couple data networks before cell phones. IBM had a data network, and I think Motorola had a data network.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And but it wasn't doable. It wasn't feasible. And even in the 90s, we were playing with handheld data devices
Mm-hmm.
because courier companies were trying to go that way.
Right.
And what really broke it wide open was smartphones and apps.
Right.
And it got down to where something that in the late 80s would have cost $5,000, 15 years later, they gave you for free at the Verizon store.
Right. Right. Right.
Kind of
right.
stuff.
Well-
So it really brought all that stuff into play. And now we take photos, we can do barcode scanning, we look at maps, we get all the stuff off of a generic cell phone.
Right, which has made it a lot easier. I remember when we first got our first Motorola radios, and back then, you were on a shared network with your drivers, and that used to be kind of fun because whenever a juicy job came up and you'd tell a driver, "Hey, give me a landline," everybody knew that so-and-so was getting a juicy job and they wanted to know why they weren't getting it. But, what was really valuable about those radios, what I do miss about that was the drivers could interact and, going places like, for us here, going
Sure,
to the
they can,
NIH
yeah.
or going to these different campuses trying to deliver stuff. Well, back then, a driver would get on the phone and say, "I'm, at building so-and-so, I'm trying to get to this building," and people could chime in and say, "Well, go here, go there," that. So I do kind of miss that aspect of it, the ability for the drivers to support each other through just, as through the radio to help them figure stuff
Right.
out. But
I find it just amazing. I go out and drive every once in a while just to get some fresh air and get out of the office. And, you got to see people in the field and see the folks at the airport and that kind of stuff. And you really realize what drivers go through.
oh yeah,
And it's so,
Amazing.
it is, even though there's technology that makes certain things simpler, that means we can just pack other more complicated things into their head because there's available space, I guess. But sometimes it's very complicated to be a driver. You're dealing with, especially doing like the medical shipments. You're dealing with checklists and being careful about this and packaging, and then you're dealing with an airline, which quite often has trainees
right,
that you're having to babysit that person who's shipping your package out.
right,
Right. And then you're dealing with a phone and mobile devices, and then you're dealing with traffic, and you've got to drive and be a sane driver. So. Drivers are good drivers are a breed that's hard to find.
Absolutely. Well, two
And
things
so,
about
yeah,
that.
put a lot
I
of
think,
work into it,
I
yeah.
think that what I've been told is that Mary Ann will say she doesn't have a driver, so she can send you out of the office, perhaps, so that she can
Yeah.
get some work done.
Yeah.
But I like that fresh air concept. But you made me think about something that we're getting ready to talk about on another episode of the Corner Office. Is Driver Appreciation Week is coming up in mid-September, and people really don't appreciate and understand what drivers. People just think it's like, oh, you're a driver. It's like, oh no,
Right.
oh no, I am not just. It's not just like pick up a package and drop it off. Do you have the right stuff? Do you have the right paperwork? Did you get the right package? Did you do this? Did you do that?
Did you hit that button at the right time?
Right.
All that kind of
So
stuff.
drivers are really obviously critical to our industry. So speaking of critical, lately, what are we've experienced challenges with labor, drivers, labor. How about you all? How's the
Oh, of course, yeah.
how's the
It
situation?
was always a challenge, and you never think it can get worse. And then it does.
Yeah, they
Right.
finally figured out how to make
Like
it worse.
like I realized this weekend, I never thought they could put airplane seats closer together than they did, but we got on an airplane on Friday and they sure did. It's like, really? So it's the same thing with drivers, it's the pandemic, in the last few months, the fuel,
Oh yeah,
who wants to go get a job with their car where they buy their gas?
right.
Um,
Absolutely.
One thing we started doing in our ads was the very first thing it says is we pay a fuel surcharge because we have to keep their attention, that we have to not scare them away.
Right.
But the courier business goes up and down, and we know most of our competition in Denver, and there's always somebody, it seems like, on their way up, but there's always somebody on their way down, maybe shrinking a little bit, and quite often you're just getting drivers from another company. It's just they had a good gig there for a couple years, but maybe it fizzled out. Maybe the management changed, maybe they lost some business or whatever, something morphed. So quite often we're getting people from other courier companies that are just looking for a new home and a solid home and that type stuff. Sometimes they're following the word. We've gained accounts from other
Sure.
companies and all of a sudden had 3 drivers show up and said, I did that work at the other company.
Right.
Kind of stuff. But otherwise, from the general public, let's say, we found it to be more challenging than ever, and a lot of it I think has to do with like the Uber Lyft
Yes.
mentality. We've got people that come in and the expectation is it's going to be exactly like that, and I can sign on at 8 in the morning and make money for a few hours, and I can sign off at 10.
Right. Right.
And in our industry, you sign on at 8, we're going to send you 4 hours down the road at 8:15.
Right.
And you're going to be gone for 8 hours,
Right.
kind of stuff. We do a lot of that. So dealing with that Lyft Uber crowd, we've had to have a lot of conversations about, this need to jump into this for more than 2 hours. You're not going to make any money jumping into it 2 hours.
Right. Well, I kind of say that Uber and Lyft have dumbed down the pull. A couple things. One,
Well, of course,
they
they
have
don't
a
have
huge
to-
they have a huge straw pulling from the pull because
Yeah.
of their ability to market and stuff like that. But as you said, it's like what we experience as a person. Well, I'm tired of delivering food or people, and they'll come over and then they realize, like you said, oh, I turn my phone off and on. The whole gig thing has been
Or-
challenging to, because we tell people we kind of need you all the time.
Right.
You need to be you need to be available.
The
And
people that
some
make the money
are the people who are available.
work 8 or 9 hours, 10 hours a day sometimes,
Right.
And,
Right.
and a lot of them, some people can get scared away when you tell them it's like, well, I really got to park the car and then go into an office building and
Absolutely.
maybe take a hand truck and pick up three boxes and bring them back out, and then I've got to drive to the airport and take them back out, and I've got to do paperwork, and some people are, semi drivers are similar. I'll drive the semi to LA and I'll back it up to your dock and you get your stuff out,
Right.
and I'm going to sit here and eat chips,
Right.
But courier drivers are really jacks of all trades, and they've got to cover a lot of bases, and besides driving, they've got to jump out sometimes and do some physical work. Fill a van with boxes, right?
Right,
On a
right.
hot summer day kind of stuff. So,
Right.
yeah, it's a certain breed of people.
Well, I think the kind of work that we focus on, and I think you focus a lot on, when you're looking at this more specialty work, the couriers have to be, they have to be more specialized. We have to be more specialized, but that ultimately leads to, stickier relationships. It's harder for people to leave you because they understand that you know their work maybe better than
Right.
them, and you have the ability
Right.
to get those drivers and get them initiated and understanding how it works. So,
Yeah.
so
You can
anyway.
basically you can get very integrated into a company's operation
Hmm.
because you learn them.
Hmm.
You become part of their staff, it seems like.
Right.
You know,
Right.
even on the courier side, you're really like one of their drivers that understands their paperwork and their clients, and you do all of their training.
Right.
You know, you really become one of them.
Hmm.
And you're right, it makes them harder to just, drop you and call another phone number, and they can't do that in
Well,
many cases.
I was thinking about you talk about drivers coming from other companies. Sometimes that's a challenge in that driver comes from another company where they don't do the kind of level of work we do.
Right.
And then you tell them and they're like, you mean I need to call you when I pick it up? I need to call you. Yes, you need to call when you pick it up. You need to call when you drop it off. Hey, guess what? They're going to want to know this. They're going to want to know that. Oh, and they're like, wow, we used to just, I mean, I knew a
Right.
guy out of courier business and talked to his people. I said, and they like, you guys collect PODs? Yeah. And he's like, oh, well, we just kind of send the drivers out, and they had a manifest sheet, and at the end of the day, they turn that in, and our people here are shocked by that kind of
Oh, yeah.
behavior because that's not what we've done. We've always been in that business where, the air courier business was the same thing. Hey, didn't know when it's picked up, need to know when it's shipped, need to know this, need to know that.
Paperwork's got to be perfect, all that kind of stuff.
Right. So yeah. So I think those are some of the challenges we face.
Sometimes you hire folks from other companies with bad habits
Right.
because they were trained
Absolutely.
bad, and you
Absolutely.
sort of have to retrain them to come up to spec, kind of thing.
Absolutely. So I understand. Speaking of Courier Appreciation Week, that at your place it's Courier Appreciation Monday every day because you grill out and stuff, and then you feed some of your people. Can you tell us about that?
Well, we did in the past, but what happened was it turned out to be a great way to generate an awful lot of business, and Murphy's Law kicked in. Whenever we were doing that, all of a sudden the phones rang off the hook, and everyone went in every direction.
Smart.
So we had, I don't know if it was smart, but Mary Ann remembers a day where the grill was burning burgers on the back dock, and she was only one in the building dispatching, and everyone was out racing to drive, and there's all this food laid out for drivers, kind of stuff. So it made it harder to do that in the course of the week, kind of stuff.
So tell us more about this Mary Ann, this person that was she one of your drivers or something?
Well, she's my wife, but she's been running the
God bless her.
operation there for 30 years.
Whoa.
And we mesh real well, and we've always joked, we sort of walk in the front door, and I walk one way and she walks the other. But she's one of these people that thinks out hours, days, maybe a week. That's her mindset. So she takes care of that, and I tend to be more of the bigger picture. So I'm dealing more with sales or back office functions, or even the admin kind of stuff like insurance or something that you have to deal with. So she's more the day-to-day, hour-to-hour nuts and bolts, make the customers happy.
I was going to
Where-
say
where I'm
that.
a little bit more like catching all the loose ends in the back end, and dealing with technology and fleet and stuff like that. But
Back in the day, before I had to refer to you as he, him, and she, her, they used to say behind every man is a good woman, and so it sounds like you guys are the embodiment of that story.
We're more side by side.
Ah,
She
okay.
truly deserves
Deserves the credit.
deserves the credit, and keeps the shop running and holds down the fort, kind of stuff.
All right, so you
And-
can think
and-
big thoughts and stuff like that.
Well, it's nice because it's hard to have one person that does all that in a company,
Sure.
right? And of course, the bigger it gets, it's the harder it is to do any of that also. So, she holds down her side and I hold down mine, and the goal every day, and we tell all of our staff this, and we tell new people when we're hired, our first decision, when there's ever a decision to be made, is, does it affect the customer in a positive way?
Mm-hmm.
The customer is the first part of the equation
Mm-hmm.
when we're making a decision. And then second is in-house. Is it easier for us in-house, kind of stuff? But
Mm-hmm.
you have drivers that'll come along and say, can I stop at Walmart on my way to this delivery? And you're like, no, it's you know.
Well, it's
this
usually
person-
better when the driver would
Yeah.
ask, because sometimes
Sometimes they don't ask.
they don't ask.
Yeah.
And you're like, where were you? I had to stop at Walmart.
Walmart,
You're
yeah.
like, you're on a delivery.
Ex-
Do you think it was time
exactly.
to shop while you're on your
Yeah,
delivery?
well, it was along the way, you
yeah,
know, but you're,
had that happen.
so, yeah, I mean, our goal is to keep the customers happy, and luckily, I guess we've been successful at that because we've had many customers for over 20 years,
Awesome.
kind of stuff. So I guess the plan's working,
Right.
you know, and we just constantly strive for the service. And we're dealing with human beings, and we're dealing with complex situations, so, you know,
Yeah.
things can fall through the cracks, but as long as we're proactive and work on it, fix it, move on to the next day, you know.
Well, you've obviously done something right, because you've been doing it for years.
Yep.
And, you know, you've been out there surviving under different, you know, I know you've been through, as you mentioned, a couple different, tried a couple different things and that,
Incarnations,
you know,
yep.
you kind of have to try to find the right fix. But you all are obviously doing the right thing, and seems like you're having some great success doing what you want to do.
Right.
So, you know, hats off to you.
You
And,
too. You guys have done a great job here.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, it's definitely a group effort. So,
I remember when you had that first fleet of Yugos.
yeah, could tell you some funny stories about
Yeah, oh, yeah.
drivers, you know, but we're not
Oh,
going to
yeah.
go there.
Right.
Kind of snibbled around the edges of that, so to speak, you know.
Yep.
But anyway, so thank you for being here. Thank you for being my friend, more
Sure.
importantly.
You too.
It's been a great relationship, and I've learned a lot, and you know,
The
met a lot of good
networking's been
people.
fantastic over the years. We've helped each other both quite a bit, I
Right,
think.
right. It's been
So-
good.
We're educating each other, is what
Always.
it is. It's a peer
Always.
group
Right.
kind of scenario.
Right. So, so thank you for that. I wish you lots of luck. For us, you know what you could do is use Excel, or if you're in Denver, use OpenRoad. With Excel, you can go to our website, www.excelcourier.com. You can get us on all the different social media stuff. And as we like to say, our tagline is moving lives forward. So thank you for moving lives forward, and thank you for listening and helping us move lives forward every day. Thank you. See you again.